There have been some questions regarding what exactly is the advantage that the new Army 9mm full metal jacket ammunition has compared to the older 124 grain full metal jacket that was used previously. First of all, this new round is called the M1152. It is truncated, aka like a cone, and has a flat nose as opposed to a round nose. It is loaded noticeably hotter than standard 9mm ammunition is. Flat nose full metal jacket ammunition is not really special. All it does is make a larger hole in fleshy targets than a round nose full metal jacket does. The round nose pushes more tissue aside without damaging it. The M1152 round is intended to be used against enemy personnel, for training, and for force protection. There is also a hollow point round called the M1153 that is going to be used as well in situations that you would not want to over-penetrate the target that you are shooting into. For example, in a crowded street, you do not want to over-penetrate the enemy soldier that you are shooting into and harm someone behind him. The hollow point is meant to be barrier blind, as it is supposed to expand and be effective on the intended target even if it goes through an object first. These hollow points are made by Winchester and are reportedly based off of their Ranger T-Series hollow points. A flat-nosed bullet would be an improvement more suitable for the early 1900s, when we could have specified that the standard ammunition used for the 1911 should be flat-nosed instead of round-nosed. Even then, that sort of marginal improvement in damage was not the best option. People understood that hollow point and split point ammunition did more damage in the early 1900s, and the U.S. wasn't a signatory to the Hague Convention of 1899. Which means that there really wasn't anything keeping the Army from perfecting hollow point ammunition and using it in actual combat. Instead of that, the Army decided to go with a .45 caliber full metal jacket round for the 1911 pistol because those .45 caliber bullets met the Army's arbitrary requirements. We also know now that expecting most any handgun round to physically and immediately incapacitate, which would be commonly known as stopping power, is a bad assumption to make. So to adopt flat-nosed full metal jacket ammunition now is a case of too little and too late, in my opinion. Many battles could have already been fought with more effective ammunition if our military leadership was a bit more forward-thinking. If I understand the situation correctly, the reason why the government is using Winchester 9mm ammunition is because SIG made a partnership with Winchester. In my opinion, it would make more sense to use the Lehigh Defense Extreme Defender bullets instead of flat-nosed full metal jackets or jacketed hollow points. Extreme Defender rounds do more damage than conventional hollow points or full metal jackets. The Defender rounds directly increase the amount of damage done to the target as velocity increases too. They are also barrier blind as well. I don't know who decided that hot flat-nose ammunition was the best thing for the military to use, but the consequence of the military using hot ammunition constantly is that they require stronger recoil springs in their handguns. Compared to other military ammunition, this is the only thing that really makes the M1152 special. However, flat-nose ammunition, no matter if it's plus P or plus P+, is still going to be limited by the fact that it's a flat, non-expanding bullet, and it can only do so much damage because of that. As a side note, I'm unaware that there is any advantage of using a truncated bullet with a flat nose versus a bullet with a round nose and flat point. I'm under the impression that the round nose flat point design is more reliable and more forgiving of non-optimized feed ramp angles than the truncated design, but I could be wrong. This is a comparison between the commercially available M18 spring and the military contract-issued M18 recoil spring. One person mentioned that he had two recoil springs that came with his military M17. The heavier one was all black and was intended to be used with plus B ammunition. The lighter one was partially colored orange and was intended for standard ammunition. He tried and failed to find the military M17 spring sold anywhere. I've looked too, and I can only conclude that SIG does not want to sell that spring on the civilian market. This is a comparison between two different springs for the compact P320s. One is the standard, and the other is marked as anti-corrosion. The difference between these two look very much like the difference between the civilian and military springs. So for the compact P320s and the M18 handguns, you could buy the better springs for the same price as the standard springs. For the full-size handguns, there are two springs available, one that is colored orange and one that is colored blue. First of all, you don't need to have the stronger all-black military spring in order to use plus P ammunition. The customer service questions from SIG are a bit confusing. They say that both the blue and the orange springs are the same. However, other answers say that the orange spring is 15 pounds and the blue one is about 14 pounds. It doesn't make any sense to me to have two exactly identical springs but just color them differently. So judging from one of SIG's answers, I would say that the blue colored M17 one is slightly different in that it is shorter when released. Apparently this is due to the design of the M17 being different. It appears to me that the reason that the M17 is slightly different in this aspect is because various changes were made to the M17 and the M18 in order for them to be more reliable with the full metal jacket and hollow point rounds that the government was using. Changes were done to the following parts: adjustment to the magazine spring, magazine follower, slide geometry, and the internal components. Some people have concluded that since SIG tried to change their handgun instead of having Winchester change their ammunition, it must therefore be a handgun problem and not an ammunition problem. That seems possible, but the Full Metal Jacket M1152 seems to be significantly less reliable than the jacketed hollow points, both before and after the mechanical changes to the pistols were made. Personally, I think the truncated bullet design is what is causing the reliability issues with the ball ammunition. I made a video a while ago about which handguns are more reliable than others. The SIG M17 and M18 are on the low end of reliability when we compare the improved versions using government tests against other handguns sold today. In that video, I used both government testing and civilian testing. When civilians test handguns, they almost always use a wide variety of ammunition. This is asking more from the handgun than the government testing, which only involves one or two different kinds of ammunition most of the time. Companies also know what the specifics of the government ammunition that is going to be used, and they can tailor their weapon to be optimized for that. Meanwhile, when companies sell weapons to civilians, they can't optimize those weapons for a specific kind of ammunition, but are essentially required to make it function with a wide variety of ammunition, otherwise they will get a lot of bad reviews and annoying customer service calls. Finally, because the M1152 has a flat nose, that means it doesn't penetrate barriers as well as the round nose 124 grain NATO ammunition does. Though I would say that the standard 124 grain NATO round was also aided in penetration here, due to the fact that it had more energy and momentum with the same barrel length than the M1152 round. From a civilian perspective, there are a few situations where you would choose to buy and use ammunition like this instead of other options. The only one that I can think of is if you are concerned about a large animal like a bear or moose attacking you and you prefer to use a non-expanding round that has a lot of penetration through flesh, but that also doesn't have the tendency to shatter on thick bone that hard cast ammunition does. The M1152 is preferred over a standard round nose bullet for this task because a flat nose penetrates deeper and cuts a larger wound track. To be fair though, the M1152 isn't the only flat nose full metal jacket 9mm round on the market. The requirement for a lot of penetration through flesh may not be an absolute necessity for bear or moose defense though. This point depends a great deal on what caliber we are talking about, as many 380 hollow points have insufficient penetration on medium-sized creatures like humans. Expanding ammunition that has sufficient penetration, or the fluted Lehigh ammunition, may also be used successfully on large game. While some people insist that you must use a non-expanding handgun round for it to be effective against large bears, that belief is based on the assumption that all expanding rounds will inevitably have too much expansion and fail to reach the vitals. Needless to say, assumptions are not always true, and this one certainly isn't 100% true. For example, it would be absurd to say that a 500 Smith & Wesson jacketed soft point would not be effective even on the largest coastal brown bear just because it is intended to expand. Just to be clear, I am not suggesting that a 500 Smith & Wesson jacketed soft point is the best round for bear defense. I'm just using this to illustrate a point. I'm Info Gun Vault. I'm known for my articulate, detailed, and analytical approach. I dispel myths, talk about how you can avoid being attacked by angry bears, and I cover many gun-related topics. I've done a great deal of research for my videos, which is why I have hundreds of pages of notes and quotations. I'd like you to come along for the ride with me in my relentless pursuit of the truth.